Okay, my name's Alessandro Talibur at the University of Liverpool, and I want to extend a really warm welcome to everybody for this special online webinar dedicated to the launch of the 2021 GEOTRACES Intermediate Data Product. It's great to see some faces, a lot of black boxes with names in them, but nice to see you all joining us for this event. To get us started, I'm going to ask Elena to play a short video about GeoTraces just to get the ball rolling for anyone who's not familiar with the program. We don't hear any audio, Elena, sorry. I could do a voiceover, but it would be a bit difficult.
I'll start again.
Thank you.
Can now?
Let's imagine that we are able to see our future in the oceans. Does this idea seem surprising to you? And yet, marine environment shelters a large amount of information which, once decrypted, gives us the magnitude of mankind's impact on the ecosystems. So it's possible to anticipate the amplitude of global warming and prepare tomorrow's world. This is the mission the GeoTraces program contributes to since 2010, bringing together scientists from 35 countries. Given the sheer size of the oceans, they had to unite their efforts to develop technical solutions essential for detection of chemical elements in the seawater. These elements include nutrients essential for marine life, such as iron, zinc, manganese, and copper. Toxins that accumulate along the food chain, such as mercury and lead, or radioactive elements. GeoTraces also measures the indicators that provide information for improving climate models, such as beryllium, radium, thorium, and rare earth elements. As an example of the complexity of this process, quantifying the iron in a sample is like measuring the amount of metal present in a paperclip dissolved in 30 Olympic swimming pools. To this end, oceanographers in the GeoTraces program are organizing major scientific cruises to explore the widest reaches of the world's oceans. These expeditions can last more than a month, during which experts carefully collect samples using clean techniques and specialized equipment throughout the depths of the ocean. The extracted samples are then transported to home laboratories before being analyzed using results which are assessed and shared. This valuable data will complete a global atlas showing the distribution of multiple trace elements throughout the ocean. Now everyone can benefit from this freely available information and use it to answer questions about our changing world. As you can see, GeoTraces' mission is a major challenge in line with the current environmental goals, in which we can all take part and change the world together.
Brilliant, thank you. I think that sets the scene nicely for the intermediate data product release that we're here for today. And as you're going to see, this data product combines data on trace elements, biogeochemistry, physics, biology, ocean atmosphere interactions. And it's a really valuable tool, we believe, for both educators and scientists. It represents also really the collective international endeavor of a range of scientists around the world who've gone and collected the data or have worked to ensure that it can be intercalibrated and integrated into an interoperable product for everyone to use. So today, our plan is to dedicate a little bit of time to telling you about the data product itself, how it was developed. There'll be a short discussion with some panelists around some of the aspects of the data product. We then, in a second part, want to show 3 science talks highlighting some of the scientific activity that's been undertaken as part of the data collection of the IDP. So, as usual, with the usual Zoom rules of engagement, it'd be great if you can keep yourself muted and refrain from dogs barking or shouting with excitement if you see something that you particularly enjoy. You can leave your camera on if you want to. It's nice for people to see faces out there in the ether as they talk. We welcome your engagement. at these two panel following Rainer's talk and a Q&A at the end. It'd be great if you can post your questions in the chat, so then I have some idea of what the topics are, and I'll try and keep a logical flow of discussion going. I'll pass you the microphone metaphorically so that you can unmute yourself and ask your question in person. So I think with that, we'll crack on, and I'll introduce the first speaker, who's our good friend and colleague, Professor Rainer Schlitzer from the Alfred Wegener Institute. Rainer has done lots of exciting and important things during his career. He's worked on the sampling and measurement of large volume C14 in the East Atlantic. He's developed and applied these really data-hungry biogeochemical inverse problems to address problems in the inverse models to address important problems in the ocean carbon cycle and other areas. He's well known for leading the development of ODV and Web ODV, and he's played a really important role in the GEOTRACES program. He's a past co-chair of the SSC. He's a current member of the DMC, and he leads the integration activity of the data product into these final files that you can download from the internet right now if you want to. So I think I'll ask Rainer to give us a wave. He's there live. Good afternoon, Rainer, in Germany. Hopefully you're doing well.
Welcome, everybody. It's kind of nice to see this kind of audience. I have been present at the two previous releases that were in person. It's a different atmosphere, it's a different kind of event, but that's kind of the times we are in. And essentially, I think we can be equally productive, especially when it comes to using the product, which I really invite all of you to do. So
brilliant. Thank you, Rainer.
Welcome, everybody.
Thanks for that, Rainer, and thanks for all your efforts as well in bringing this all together. So I think with that, Elena, can we play Rainer's presentation?
Hi, I'm Rainer Schlitzer from the Alfred Wegener Institute in Bremerhaven, Germany. In this video, I want to show you what the new GeoTraces IDP 2021, what it contains and how you can access it. IDP 2021 is the third product in a series of intermediate products. Like the previous data products, it consists of two parts, the actual digital data, and as a second part, the GeoTraces Atlas that contains visuals of the IDP 2021 data. The digital data part has 5 separate data sets: seawater discrete sample, seawater sensor data, aerosol data, precipitation data, and cryosphere data. I'm going through them quickly. So the cryosphere data, that's a new data set in IDP 2021. Presently, it's relatively small, contains only a few stations in the Arctic that have data for ice and melt pot, in total 10 TIs. We anticipate that this data set will grow in the future. Precipitation data for the Atlantic, presently only, there are data for rain for 75 TIs. The aerosol data set that covers Pacific, Atlantic, Mediterranean, Black Sea, and also the Arctic. It has data values for 167 TIs in total. The seawater sensor data set that covers all ocean basins, as you can see here. It has very good coverage in the Arctic, in the Atlantic, but also Mediterranean, Black Sea, Indian Ocean, and the Pacific. It's providing high resolution data in the vertical for these parameters: temperature, salinity, oxygen, chlorophyll, fluorescence, beam attenuation, turbidity, and PER. The sensor data are included in the IDP because we think they help the interpretation of the actual TI data. So the seawater discrete sample data set here, which I would consider the core of the IDP and the one with the most values. The data coverage is shown here in this map. In blue, the stations that were already in the IDP 2017. In red, those stations that are new in the IDP 2021. And as you can see, there are a lot of new data that are increasing geographical coverage considerably. Especially, this is true for the Indian Ocean and the Arctic, but also there are many new data here in the Pacific, in the Southern Ocean, or in the Atlantic here. So overall, we have data for 570 TIs. That's a very large number. We have better coverage, especially in the Indian Ocean and the Arctic. Overall, there is a doubling of the numbers of cruises, stations, and data values compared to IDP 2017. In total, more than 350 data contributors have given data into the IDP. We thank all of those contributors. Without their willingness to share the data, the IDP would not exist. In addition to the actual data, we have put a lot of energy into gathering and maintaining metadata. And these are combined in so-called info files. Info files exist for all available cruises and parameters. They include information about the parameter itself, about the creators of the data, about the analytical methods, and about the cruise operation. They also include publication information and allow you to retrieve publications in a dynamic way. So even in a year's time, when you click on the publication retrieval, you will get even the most recent publications. This here shows an example info file, the description of the parameter, names of the originators, links to the analytical methods, link to the cruise report here, processing information, if some processing were done at the data assembly center. And down here, this is the link for getting the actual publications. For example, I've clicked on this link and you would get the citation of the available publication. One more click here on the DOI of the publication and you could read the actual manuscript. So we consider having these metadata information crucial, especially for users in years to come. So let me summarize the digital data of the IDP 2021. We have some new data types, the cryosphere data. We have much higher geographical coverage, and we have a doubling of the actual content of the data value count. So it's a major increase compared to the previous IDP. This product would not have been possible with huge amounts of contributions and work by a large number of people and committees, and they are listed in this slide. There are too many names to read them all here, but you may want to stop the video at this point and read all the names and give recognition to all these people. So let's go to the second part of the IDP, the GEOTRACES Atlas. This contains visuals, it has section plots and animated 3D scenes for the IDP 2021 data. In total, there is this large number of almost 1,500 sections and almost 270 rotating scenes. All this is available at this website, http://egeotraces.org. When you go there, you see this first page. You start by selecting a data group and one of the tracers in that group. which I've done here for dissolved trace elements and dissolved iron. In the map, now all sections that have data for this selected tracer, they are highlighted in red with all their labels annotated here. You can click on any one, and here I've chosen GP19 as an example. If you click on one of these labels, then you get the section plot for this parameter. Iron was selected for this cruise, GP19. In the bottom part, there's additional information. So there is a description line that has details of the selected tracer. The next line contains the list of all the people who have created these data. And then there are additional links that help you go further. So there's a group, other tracers along this section. So if you are still interested in GP19, but instead of iron, you want to see a different tracer, you select one of these tracers. If you are interested in the tracer you have selected, iron in this case, but you want to see it at different sections, not GP19, but others, then this block here lets you choose other sections. Or if you want to see 3D animations for this tracer, then you look into this list here. For example, I've clicked here the Pacific as the basin that I'm interested in. And then you would get one of these animated rotating 3D images like this one here. And as you can see, these 3D rotating scenes, they summarize the information of many cruises. And they give you an overview of this tracer in the particular basin. And you can see features, important features quickly. So that's the value of these 3D scenes. So let me summarize IDP 2021. We are proud of it. I hope you have seen that it contains exciting new data and visuals. And we want to invite you to use it. What I'm now going to show is different ways of how you can access these resources. And there are 3 ways of doing so. The first one, bulk, full package download. This is for you if you want to have everything and you want to have it on your own local computer. Maybe you are going in remote areas, you have no internet connection. This is the way to go. You have everything, bulk download. But very often people don't want everything. They want to subset by region, by time, by parameter, and only want to have this special selection of data. Then the second way is for you. Or if you're just curious and you want to analyze and browse and visualize data without downloading anything, then the third option is for you. A new development compared to the previous IDP 2017 is that before you get access to the resources, you have to agree to the new IDP 2021 Fair Data Use Statement. Compared to IDP 2017, no longer do you have to register or log in before you get access. So the Fair Data Use Statement, that is what you have to agree to. So the different ways of getting access, the IDP 2021 bulk download. You go to this web address that will take you to this page. Down here is the link to the actual download pages. you will have access to all 5 data packages, and you will have a choice of 3 formats. You can have the data as CSV ASCII, as NetCDF, or as ODV collection. Second way, if you want subsetting, if you have special interest, if you have a special domain, if you want just a few parameters, this is the way to go. This is a service developed at Alfred Wegener Institute. This is the address, geotraces.webodv.awi.de. When you go there, you will see a page like this here. The selection and download process is done in 3 steps, and you control these steps here in this navigation bar at the top. Here we are now at the cruises, domain, and time selection page. You use these controls to do this. In this case, we have focused on the South Atlantic and have just chosen a few of the IDP cruises. Then you select variables. You go to the second page. That looks like this. In the middle down here, you have the possibility to select parameters, either as entire groups, if you push this control, or by choosing individual parameters. Third step, that's the actual download page here. You select the format, and once you press one of these 3 formats, the extraction and the download will start, and you will receive the data subset as a zip file in your web browser. This only takes a few seconds, and you have the data. The third way of accessing IDP data, online analysis and visualization, you actually download nothing and you don't install any software. This service we make available under 2 addresses. This is the address where you also did the subsetting and extraction. But the IDP data are also included in this relatively new Explore website under this address, explore.webodv.awi.de, that takes you to this page here, which offers a large number of data sets for the Earth system. And it's including ocean, atmosphere, ice, sediment, and rivers. IDP 2021 data, they are integrated here under traces. So you would navigate into this tree and open the IDP items. In the example I'm showing, I have selected the seawater discrete sample. So if you click on this item, you will get in your web browser a figure and an interface that looks like the standalone ODV. It not only looks like the standalone ODV, but it also behaves like. So if you are a user of the standalone ODV software, you will be able to start working with this interface almost immediately. So this service, it provides this interface. It has all the IDP data with it, but also it has all the views that were used to generate GEOTRACES sections. So you can load any of these views and actually have a live picture of these data here for further analysis. And as I mentioned before, there is no data download or software installation needed for this access route. So with this, I want to summarize my entire presentation. I hope I have convinced you that IDP 2021 is an exciting new resource. We invite you to use it heavily for your research, for teaching, or outreach. So with this, I close and I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rainer, for that lovely presentation. That's a fantastic introduction to the data product. So now we'll have a session of kind of questions and discussion. For this, I'm going to add to Rainer's considerable expertise by inviting a small panel to help answer some of these questions. So there'll be Rainer Schlitzer, who you all know from the Alfred Wegener Institute, Maite Maldonado from UBC. Maite has been leading the Biogeotraces activities in the GeoTraces program and is a current member of the data management committee. Rob Middag from NEOS in the Netherlands. Rob's the current Netherlands SSC rep on GeoTraces. Jun Nishioka from Hokkaido University in Japan. Jun is currently on the data management committee as well. And finally, Adrian Bird from University of Georgia. Adrian's the scientific steering committee representative for the United States. So as I mentioned in the chat, it would be great if you can throw some questions in there for me to use to animate this discussion. Before we do that, I've got a question I'd like to ask the panel now, and it's about the integration and the inclusion of the biological data as part of the Biogeotraces effort. So in the IDP, I know there's the continuation of the inclusion of the HPLC pigment data, the protein data, and the cell quota, elemental cell quota, phytoplankton. But I know there's been some efforts to improve and expand the integration and the ability for users to discover associated biological data with the IDP. And so I wonder if Maite, if you could tell folks about that, to just highlight that particular aspect of the IDP.
Would you like me to share the slides or just?
You can show the slide. Yeah, why not? Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so thank you for giving me the opportunity to showcase this. So yeah, we're super excited to have Biogeotraces Ohmic data included in addition to what we have already. And in this, can you see my slide?
Yeah, perfect.
In this slide, I'm just going to describe that. So what we have is 4 sample descriptors that are associated with the Ohmic data. And there is actually 3 types of Ohmic data. There is single cell genomics, 16S and 18S rRNA for taxonomic description of the community, microbial community. And we also have metagenomic data. So you can access that data by using the accession numbers to the NCBI or EMBL EBI websites, and those numbers are in the descriptors. And in addition, there is an additional descriptor, a 4th one, that is going to give you a link to a web page where you can get a taxonomic analysis of the data. So what I have here is stations for which we have metagenomic data. And this is what you will get here. You can see right here the accession number for the NCBI website to get you to that data. And if you click on the link associated with the metagenomic data, it's going to take you to the EMBL EBI website where you can get descriptions of the functional and taxonomic community, such as illustrations like you can see here. So if there are any additional questions.
I think that's great, Maite. I think thanks for showing that. And I know that was a big practical challenge because of the fact that the GeoTraces IDP data is, it's a static data set, and the biological data is a moving feast. So we had to develop this interactive, this active link to an evolving data set. Can you stop sharing your screen possibly, Maite?
Yeah.
Brilliant. So the next question I want to ask the panelists, I'm going to ask Rob to speak to this, is about the intercalibration aspects. Obviously, this data set works because we don't rely on one single nation to go and make all these measurements around the world. We rely on lots of different scientists from lots of different nations to spread technology, spread capacity. And then ultimately, we want to be able to bring all that data back together at the end to produce this product that Ryan's just shown us about. And obviously, intercalibration is at the core of that. And I wondered, Rob, if you wanted to say a few words on that aspect.
Sure. So as also introduced in the video, we didn't start out by producing all great data. It's been quite a challenge. So part of this is before my time, but from what I've heard is that one of the first times folks did an intercalibration exercise, the figure that was produced kind of looked like a kid had played with a paintball gun, rather than scientists trying to measure the same parameter, the same location, in the same sample. It became really obvious that best practices were needed, including stuff like reference material or intercalibration exercises, just to make sure that when two different scientists or two different nations go to the same location in the ocean, they actually produce the same data. So this led to a really unique community effort in working together to making sure to get a global data set of the highest possible quality, rather than only focusing on results of an individual nation or individual lab. It really was a community effort. And it definitely wasn't a one-way street where one person or one lab basically said, this is how we're going to do it, this is how it's supposed to be done. In the beginning, everybody faced problems and everybody had annoying instances where there was contamination. Nobody really had the golden rule, so to say. But it was really a joint process that everybody went through to try and figure out what was the best way of doing this. And because everybody went through this process and everybody learned along the way, it also made it really easy to convey the lessons that were learned from own experiences later on, to convey these experiences to those joining on later. And most of the lessons that were learned are not just in our collective memory. The GeoTraces community has put great effort in producing the cookbook, the GeoTraces cookbook, that's on the GeoTraces website as well. And despite the name, measuring trace methods is quite often still not as simple as just following a recipe. Some trace methods, of course, are easier than others. But for many of them, if a new lab or a new nation is trying to set up methods for some of the harder trace metals like zinc or iron, it still often is a joint effort where either somebody from the from the S&I committee or somebody from the community is working with somebody else to try and overcome some of the hurdles that you will experience when setting up a method or a procedure. And I think this really is a success of the GeoTraces program, that we now have every IDP, we have more and more nations and more labs producing high quality, accurate data. Especially if you see where we came from, I think it's really testament to this community that we have been working together and really got to this already third intermediate data product of a lot of high quality data, where we feel really confident that all the data that's in there is intercomparable.
Brilliant, thanks, Rob. And I guess that's a good opportunity for us to sort of put on record the acknowledgement of the members of the Standards and Intercalibration Committee who have spent far more time than they may have liked, examining data, supporting PIs to integrate their data. And I think that's the really important part. This isn't a kind of gatekeeping exercise. It's a supportive exercise to enable us to include the maximum amount of data as we can in the product. So thanks to all the scientists involved in that. You spoke in your answer, Rob, a little bit about lessons learned, and I want to take that as a kind of jumping off point to think about, this is the third data product that GeoTraces has produced. And in doing that, we've learned a lot of lessons. But I'm wondering, I'm going to ask Adrian, maybe, if you can discuss, think a little bit about how those lessons might translate to other programs. What we've learned in GeoTraces in trying to deliver this and put together this data product, are there lessons for other international programs that they could take forward in this regard?
Yeah, so thanks, Al. I think GeoTraces is, for me, coming in, I came in about 6 years ago and has sort of seen 2 releases of IDP. And it's been an amazing experience to be involved in a program that has evolved to meet the challenges that it's faced. And I think that's one of the lessons that a big project has to learn, is that your initial plans might be very, very good, and you might learn from other people, but at the same time, you're going to have to be flexible and evolve as new challenges appear. And so I think some of the things that have really sort of been brought home to me are, first of all, the human resources, the people who need to get involved to be able to make a program like this work, a program of this scale, as Al was saying and Rob was alluding to, it, are really large. And there's a lot of people who are heroes who've put a lot of effort into doing various aspects of things. The S&I committee, the data management committee, large numbers of people, as well as the PIs themselves. Then I think one of the biggest things for me, and I think this is going to be something that a lot of people are going to be discussing with Biogeoscapes that's coming along and a large number of other similar programs, is the use of software frameworks to help make those jobs easier and more transparent. And I think, you know, I've seen the evolution of the different software packages being used here in GeoTraces over the last 6 years. And I think everybody has been absolutely astonished. Everybody who's used them has been astonished at how they've changed their way of working and made their work a lot easier and a lot more interconnected with the different groups. And so I think you might, any large program could plan for this, build upon this kind of understanding that we've already developed here. But at the same time, as we're discovering with Biogeotraces, you actually need to have some flexibility and be able to adapt those frameworks to the specific problems you're looking at. And then the final thing is have really good science questions, because that's what drives the whole program in the beginning. Have really good science questions that can be addressed in these, that need to be addressed in these very large scale programs. So I think there's a great deal of legacy that GeoTraces can give to the community in terms of what it's learned in how to organize these kinds of projects.
Brilliant, thanks, Adrian. I was going to ask a question about, you know, we talk a lot about research here actually, and we often think about the data in GeoTraces as a sort of research tool and the IDP as a research tool, but Rainer alluded to it in his presentation, and there's a comment in the chat about it. It's also a fantastic educational platform for infusing people into this exciting area of discovery, and also just facilitating the teaching that you might do. And I was going to ask that question of someone on the panel, but Ben, you asked a question in the chat. I wonder if you want to just make your comment here about the use of how the IDP can move out of the research space and into the education space.
Yeah, sure, Al, I'm happy to say a little more about it. So yeah, just adding the comment that I'm teaching an Introduction to Ocean Science course right now, and have been using the Intermediate Data Product from 2017 to demonstrate a number of ocean biogeochemical principles, and had wanted to do this for a while, but I actually wasn't aware that the WebODV interface was as easily usable, I guess, as that, because I never tried it. I was just been using it on my own computer, and was worried about sort of the managing all of the student computer needs that would entail. But I've just been really pleased to see how easy the WebODV interface is to use and how quick it is. And I just wanted to throw in a plug for the usefulness of this tool for teaching ocean science and ocean biogeochemistry. So yeah.
Brilliant, thank you, Ben. I'm sure Rainer and his team are delighted to hear that. I second that. It's a really useful way to just get the data you need or you want from the data product. Rob, do you want to come in on that, please?
Yeah, I'm not sure if Ben was actually meaning this, but I wanted to add here, obviously it's a great resource for getting material for your lectures, but it's also a brilliant resource for discovery-led science. So rather than you telling the students how it works, you can let them use the data to figure out the answer for themselves. And well, I think that drives the message down a lot better than just showing the old-fashioned vertical profiles. Look, silicate is higher in the Pacific than in the Atlantic. You can actually say, well, follow the thermal haline circulation, and what do you see and why might it be the same for the Southern Ocean? Why are the nutrient type trace elements like cadmium and zinc higher there, but not iron? It's a different kind of teaching, and we now have, well, a tool to actually do that. And I think that's a really a major improvement. So thanks, Rainer.
Brilliant. Thanks for adding that, Rob. One of the comments I saw in the chat was from Bob about the instructions Rainer gave and whether they would be made available. I guess there's no reason why we can't put a PDF doc on the website with the instructions about how to access the data and these kinds of things. I'm just aware of the time a little bit moving on here. So I'm wondering quickly whether there's two kind of things I want to address before we move on to the second part. The first is about the fair use agreement. This is a change of sort of style for this data product. We don't require people to log in and register. Instead, we ask you to agree to a set of principles about the use and reuse and acknowledgement of the scientists who've contributed the data. And I'll use my privilege as kind of host just to make that point and to make that plug and to say this is a really important step actually for GeoTraces, because it allows our data to then go on and have a broader life in the earth sciences community. It can then be used by other scientists, integrated into other larger scale earth system data sets. And I think it's a really exciting opportunity to see what other biogeochemists or trace element scientists will make of this data. And before closing this part, I just want to ask a sort of forward-looking question. I might ask June if that's okay to sort of talk about, we've come a long way with this data product. Where is GeoTraces going to go towards the next data product? And I don't know if you had any thoughts to add on that, June.
Thank you very much. I think this GeoTraces data set is very valuable for not only for the GeoTraces community, but also the many other geoscience community. So maybe we have to expect the IDP 2021 is expected to be the further utilized by the other global research projects, such as SOLAS and such as INVER. So maybe we have to share these data set and today's information to the many other global research project community. So maybe that is a more important part for further GeoTraces program.
Thank you, June. And not to ignore anybody in the chat, Nico Lang has asked a question. Nico, I'm just going to read it if that's okay, just for timeliness, about whether we use any post-data collection checks to test the intercomparability of the analysis. Do we make use of crossover analysis and these kinds of things? Rob, do you want to answer that question?
Sure. The short answer is yes. That's really a very time-consuming effort that the Standard and Calibrations Committee is doing. So every data that's submitted to GeoTraces has to pass the SNI committee. They're not mean, they're very helpful. But what they will do is have, based on some pre-determined format where everybody has to fill out what they did to ensure that their data meets the quality criteria. And definitely for the section cruises, we always aim to have a crossover with a previous expedition. And if that's not possible, then standard reference materials or collecting duplicate samples and sending this out to another lab. Or if that's also not possible for some parameters, then maybe comparison with some historic data. And all of that information is, if I'm not mistaken, always retrievable in the info sheet, in the info file that Rainer showed as well. The metadata will also explain what kind of intercomparison was done to validate the data. And not the SNI committee report, but it explains how the data was intercalibrated. I hope I'm not saying anything wrong there.
Can I add something? So unlike data sets like CLODAP, for instance, who actually do corrections to the data, this was not done for the IDP. So the data are collated as they are delivered from the scientists. There's no shifts applied, nothing.
Yeah, that's an important point. Thanks for adding that, Rainer. Okay, brilliant. So I think with that, we'll end this first part of the webinar, we'll rearrange the chairs on the podium. I'll thank Rainer for his presentation, the panelists, and the audience for their questions. It's a lot quicker to turn around on a webinar, so they're already rearranged the chairs, and we can move on to the second part of the event, which is to highlight a bit more of the science that's been going on with GeoTraces data. And so for that, we've got three speakers. The first one is Laramie Jensen from University of Washington. Laramie is currently a postdoc fellow at the Cooperative Institute for Climate, Ocean and Ecosystem Studies. She's working on trace metal cycling and physical circulation in the Arctic. Laramie was also super tech on the US Pacific Meridional Transect GP15, all the way down from Alaska to Tahiti, and so has made a fantastic contribution to the data that's present in the IDP. So Laramie, do you want to say hi to everybody? It's kind of a bit early.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for that intro.
No worries. Thanks for being here. I know it's early in Seattle at the moment. So Laramie's recorded a nice presentation for us, so I'll ask Elena to play that for us now, please.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Laramie Jensen. I'm at the University of Washington, and I'm going to be talking today about some of the new data added to the IDP 2021 from the Arctic Ocean. So I wanted to give you a little bit of history and context behind GeoTraces in the Arctic Ocean. And a lot of the work that I'm going to show you today has really built off of cruises done in 2007 and 2008 during the International Polar Year, or IPY. Now, after these cruises, a 2009 workshop was held in Germany to advocate for a GeoTraces specific program to the Arctic Ocean. And from the US side, this was heavily championed by Dave Cadco and others. Originally, the plan was to do the GP15 transects next after GP16, but because of the strong scientific advocacy as well as support from international collaborators and funding sources, it was opted to do the Arctic transects next. And by 2012, planning had started in earnest for the 2015 GeoTraces program, and it was decided that 4 cruises would go up at the same time. What this looked like was the GNO1 US cruise here in blue, the Canadian GNO2 and GNO3 cruises here in white and yellow, and the German-led cruise here in red, GNO4. And I want to especially acknowledge and thank the chief scientists, as well as the captain and crew from these 4 cruises, as well as all the scientists both at sea and on land who made the analyses and data possible that I'm going to show here today. So in true GeoTraces fashion, this adds a lot of spatial resolution to what we already had in the Arctic Ocean. But it was also designed to capture important processes that might be affecting trace elements in the Arctic. So things like exchange with the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean, captured here in the Bering Strait, the inflow from the Pacific into the Arctic, as well as the outflow from the Arctic through the archipelago into Baffin Bay and Labrador Sea, and then into the greater North Atlantic, captured here, and the inflow from the North Atlantic into the Barents Shelf area, captured here. And I should say that another cruise went out in 2016, the GNO5 transect to the Fram Strait, which is another really important point of exchange between the Arctic and the Atlantic, but I won't be able to talk about that today. You'll also notice that the Arctic is really dominated by continental shelf area, and these cruises, of course, were able to capture a lot of the exchange between the shelf and the ocean basin. The Arctic is also pretty unique in that it receives about 10% of the global river discharge, despite only being about 1% of the total ocean volume. So these are just some approximate locations of major river watersheds from both North America and the Asia subcontinent that flow into the Arctic. And so the Arctic surface water ends up being a major freshwater reservoir with all this river discharge as well as seasonal sea ice melt. And of course, atmospheric deposition was also sampled in the form of both aerosol deposition as well as collections of rain and snow. So I wanted to start off by showing you some sections of trace metals from my own work, combining the GNO1 and GNO4 cruises. So starting here in the North Pacific and transiting across the North Pole and ending here on the Barents Sea shelf. So these sections, again, go from the Chukchi Sea, Chukchi Shelf area here, across to the North Pole approximately here, and end on the Barents Shelf. And we're looking at iron, copper, nickel, zinc, and manganese. And just looking at some of these sections, you can already begin to see where trace metal distributions overlap or diverge. So some commonalities here being the transpolar drift current in the surface of the central Arctic. So this current brings river water from the shelves across the Arctic. And this ended up being a major source of trace metals to the central Arctic. You can see here for iron, nickel, manganese, and copper, this is especially prevalent. The shelf, again, also supplied a lot of trace metals to the Arctic, and this is also advected offshore into intermediate water masses for metals like iron, nickel, copper, zinc, and manganese. Almost all the trace metals were affected by the Chukchi Shelf, as well as the presence of hydrothermal venting, which you can see here in the Eastern Arctic captured on the GNO4 transect. So that affected metals like iron and manganese. And I should say that this was already observed in other cruises like the ICY cruises, but this adds a lot more spatial coverage of that plume and the plume trajectory. I'm going to show another section now going from the North Pacific again, across the Bering Strait into the Canada sub-basin of the Arctic, and then across the archipelago and into Baffin Bay. So now combining the GNO1, GNO3, and GNO2 transects. So again, we're looking at iron, copper, nickel, zinc, manganese, going here from the Chukchi Shelf all the way across the archipelago into Baffin Bay and out into the Labrador Sea. And you'll again notice the presence of the shelf here, and that you can trace that shelf water that's pulled into this intermediate halocline water mass across the archipelago in some cases. And this is certainly influenced and augmented and modified by local river sources, as well as the role of tidal resuspension. You can even see some local remineralization here in the older, more isolated waters of Baffin Bay. And importantly, we're keeping an eye on this region because this is an outflow into the Labrador Sea and then into the North Atlantic. So this could potentially have an effect on our global elemental budget for these trace metals. I want to now talk a little bit more in detail about copper and nickel and some of my own work looking at a copper and nickel synthesis across all 4 cruises in the Arctic Ocean. And I'm showing these profiles just to give you a sense for how good intercalibration was for the trace metals across all 4 cruises. So we're looking at the US and Canada cruises, as well as between the US and German cruises. And the overlap was quite consistent, very good intercalibration. And you can also notice how similar the profiles of nickel and copper are in the Arctic to each other, which is not necessarily what we expect based on what we know globally about copper and nickel. Actually, this led to an interesting result, whereas across the entire Arctic, copper and nickel were linearly related to each other. So we're looking at copper here on the y-axis and nickel on the x-axis. And I'm showing the Arctic data in color, colored by depth. And in the background in gray is all the data from the IDP 2017, so the rest of the global ocean in terms of copper and nickel. And I've highlighted profiles from the Atlantic and the Pacific to give you a sense of how copper and nickel are generally related throughout the water column. And you'll notice that in kind of reverse to what we see globally, the highest concentrations for copper and nickel are at our shallowest sample depth, and the lowest concentrations are at the deepest sample depth. And if we look just at the Arctic, we can see that this is really driven by high concentrations in the surface coming from those transpolar drift stations, and very much anchored by low deep water concentrations that were quite consistent, very homogeneous. So in this way, copper and nickel actually become a really nice example of what we've learned about trace metals in the Arctic Ocean, especially in combining now multiple cruises together. So we again see the influence of that transpolar drift that forms the maximum in the surface for concentrations of copper and nickel, shown here. And that work has already been really nicely summarized in a synthesis paper by Matt Charette and others in 2020. The role of the Western Arctic halocline, so this halocline that's being produced on the Chukchi Shelf here and pulled into an intermediate water mass, that very much dominated trace element distribution throughout the Arctic. And that's mostly because of the role of the Chukchi Shelf here. Whereas in contrast, the Barents Shelf was not a significant source of trace metals like copper and nickel. And you can see that there's no halocline that's nutrient or trace metal rich in the Eastern Arctic. Another really interesting feature that was observed in papers looking just at one cruise or combining the cruises was a gradient in deep water concentrations between these sub-basins in the Arctic. Notice that metals like nickel and copper are slightly higher in the Eastern Arctic compared to the Western Arctic. And now in combining these cruises and multiple different data sets, we might be able to investigate why that is. So I'll just leave you with some of the major points about trace metals in the Arctic that we've now learned in looking at all of this data together. Physical circulation is a major control. We have a clear absence of normal vertical biological cycling that might produce remineralization signals in the deep water. The rivers and shelves are major sources of trace metals like copper and nickel to the Arctic. And deep water could provide some insight to elemental cycling, especially in the absence of our typical biological signals. With that, thank you, and I welcome any questions.
Thanks for preparing that excellent talk, Laramie, really showing the value of bringing together these data from these 3 cruises. Really fantastic. So the Arctic was a place where we got a lot of new data in IDP 2021. And another basin where coverage has really exploded is in the Indian Ocean. And our next speaker, Professor Sunil Kumar Singh, is going to talk to that. Hi, Sunil. I hope you're well in India. Sunil is director of NIO in Goa. He's really been spearheading the GEOTRACES program in India. He's the past SSC rep for India, and he currently sits on the data management committee. And I think the efforts of the Indian colleagues is really fantastic in filling up this really previously undersampled ocean basin. So Sunil, if it's okay, we'll just go straight to your presentation, if that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Alessandro. Thanks a lot for providing this opportunity to present the data. Actually, have a large number of data sets are there, so part of that will be presented today. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sunil.
Good evening, everybody. Myself, Sunil Kumar Singh, from National Institute of Oceanography, Goa, is going to present the recent result of trace element in the Indian Ocean obtained under GEOTRACES India program. Now the question is why we have done a study in the Indian Ocean. Indian Ocean is very unique basin. Unlike Atlantic and Pacific Ocean, Indian Ocean has low latitude land boundary which impacts the ocean circulation in this particular ocean. In addition to that, it receives, particularly the Bay of Bengal receives large amount of freshwater and sediment from the Ganga, Brahmaputra and Ravi River, which is impacting the biogeochemistry of the Indian Ocean. Also, the Arabian Sea receives lots of dust from the nearby arid land masses, which is impacting the chemistry of this river, part of the ocean. In addition, Indian Ocean is impacted by the 2 monsoon, the seasonal reversal of wind. One is southwest monsoon and another is northeast monsoon. So during southwest monsoon, Arabian Sea water goes to the Bay of Bengal, and during northeast monsoon, Bay of Bengal water comes to the Arabian Sea. And this is also transport huge amount of water and sediment from one basin to another, which impacts the ocean biogeochemistry. Indian Ocean is crisscrossed by several mid-oceanic ridges, like Carlsberg Ridge, Central Indian Ridge, Southwest Indian Ridge, and Southeast Indian Ridge. This mid-oceanic ridges, a lot of material is coming to the water column, and hence it is impacting the biogeochemistry. Indian Ocean receives deep water coming from the Atlantic and Antarctic and moving towards north. And it receives surface water from the Pacific through Indonesian through flow. This water goes to the Atlantic via Agulhas, and this water circulation also impacts the biogeochemistry. In addition, both Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea are having intermediate oxygen minimum zone, perennial in nature, which is because of fresh water supply in the Bay of Bengal and upwelling in the Arabian Sea. This presence of oxygen minimum zone again impact the biogeochemistry. So we have started the GEOTRACES India program in 2012, which was funded by Ministry of Earth Sciences. 7 institutions of India participated in this program, and we installed clean sampling system in one of the MOES ships, that is Sagar Kanya, and later on we have also operated this from Sindhu Sadhana. The first cruise was launched in 2013 to sample open Indian Ocean. We collected samples from open ocean, coastal ocean, estuary, aerosol samples were also sampled to know about the sources, sinks, and internal cycling of trace metals. Till now, we have measured several trace elements, mostly in the dissolved phase. We have measured iron, manganese, zinc, aluminum, cadmium, cobalt, nickel, copper, lead, uranium, thorium, rare earth elements. And also we have measured isotopes of neodymium, hafnium, molybdenum, silicon, thorium to understand the biogeochemical and oceanographic processes. We have sampled till now 8 sections, which covers Bay of Bengal, Arabian Sea, subtropical Indian Ocean, and southern sector of the Indian Ocean. We have sampled up to 30 degrees south, and you can see the sampling is quite intense in Indian Ocean. And in these waters have been measured for all the parameters which I have told you earlier. So for that, we have established the measurement technique like flow injection system, which was used in the beginning to measure iron, zinc, manganese, and aluminum on board. And later on, and now we are measuring all the trace metals using HR-ICP-MS coupled with CFAST. In addition to establishing the system, before moving to the detailed measurement of all the samples, we have measured a lot of samples from crossover station, which was earlier sampled by Japanese and Clever program. So we have collected those samples and measured these elements and shown that our measurement techniques and sampling techniques are working all right. In the oxygen minimum zone. So iron is getting remineralized in oxygen minimum zone, and particularly in the Arabian Sea, they are coinciding with the nitrite maxima. So it shows that denitrification is causing the iron release in oxygen minimum zone. Also, you can see iron is getting supplied from the different hydrothermal regions. So this is the iron which is coming from the Carlsberg ridge. So this can come up to 300 water depth. And then we have also iron which is getting supplied from the Central Indian ridge. Iron is also coming from the Kerry and Edmund Bend, which has been showing huge peak. And in addition to that, in Indian Ocean, we are getting huge amount of iron from the subduction zone. Indian plate is getting subducted with the Burmese plate, and in that Sumatra region, we are getting a lot of iron which is coming from the recycled water, which is going down and coming back in this area. So if you see the iron distribution in the photic zone of Arabian Sea, the photic zone integrated iron, dissolved iron, is almost double in Arabian Sea compared to the subtropical Indian Ocean. You can see here. It shows a very significant positive correlation with photic zone integrated primary production. This suggests higher availability of iron is responsible for high primary production in the Arabian Sea compared to the subtropical Indian Ocean. Further, we estimated the iron budget coming from lateral and vertical advection and diffusion, and also the iron which is coming from atmospheric dust deposition. So here we see that iron coming from lateral and vertical advections are very much important, and they are much higher compared to the atmospheric iron supply. And both biotic and abiotic processes are comparable, particularly in the Arabian Sea, and they are removing significant amount of iron in this region. And based on these estimates, the residual time of iron is estimated to be about 0.1 to 1 year in the 40 quarters of the Arabian Sea, much lower than the earlier estimates. And if you see the iron limitation, particularly coming to the zinc, zinc shows a nutrient type of behavior in Indian Ocean. And zinc is having very special feature in the Indian Ocean. So if you plot all the zinc which we have measured in subtropical Indian Ocean with silica, so zinc by silica ratio in the subtropical Indian Ocean is about 0.062, which is very much similar to the global ocean. But same thing if you plot in the Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal, the slope is much lower. It is coming about 0.045 and 0.049. And if you plot this thing in the oxygen minimum zone, it is going much lower again, and it is almost about 0.03. So it is being seen that zinc concentration in the oxygen minimum zone area, particularly in the northern Indian Ocean, compared to the silica, zinc is significantly lower, and which could be happening because of zinc loss in the oxygen minimum zone. So in oxygen minimum zone, zinc is getting lost due to the sulfide formation, zinc sulfide formation. So this is one of the mechanism. Also, it could be possible because in oxygen minimum zone, prokaryotes are more, and because of more prokaryotes, since the prokaryotes requires less zinc, so such type of productivity where prokaryotes are more, they can regenerate lower zinc in the intermediate water column, so which could be responsible for the lower zinc in the Indian Ocean. We have also measured aluminum in the Indian Ocean, and here you can see in both Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal, significant of aluminum is being supplied by the continental shelf area. So the sediment which is being supplied from the Ganga Brahmaputra, they are acting as a source of zinc, in aluminum, the source of aluminum in the Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea. Also, the lot of aluminum is being supplied from the atmospheric dust sources. In addition, some of the ridge system, particularly the hydrothermal ridge area, this silicate material is getting interacted with the water, and they are supplying a lot of aluminum. And the dust deposition is showing a seasonal variation, and that is getting reflected in the aluminum concentration of the surface water in the Arabian Sea. We have also measured manganese. So you can see here, this is the manganese profile. So manganese shows, like iron, it is also getting regenerated in the oxygen minimum zone. In addition to oxygen minimum zone, it is also getting some manganese from the continental shelf area, which is also reflected both in Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal. Bay of Bengal, both in the northern Bay of Bengal and in the Andaman area, this manganese concentration is significantly higher, and this manganese is getting supplied from the sediments interaction, and particularly the pore water. Manganese is getting supplied due to the reduction of this manganese, and they are getting dissolved when coming to the water column. And as I have suggested, the oxygen minimum zone is also responsible for the manganese significantly increasing. So lead concentration is significantly high, so it can come from the riverine sources or entrepreneurial sources, and also the surface is very high, so it can come from atmospheric deposition. And this concentration is significantly higher in the Indian Ocean compared to the Atlantic and Pacific. So still, I think lead is getting supplied. Anthropogenic lead is coming, even though the lead, gasoline lead is not there, but I think the coal burning is supplying significant amount of lead in this area. Copper is also measured. So copper typically, you can see the concentration is going up to 6 to 7 nanomolar. So it is increasing with depth. And in both Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea, some of the coastal area copper is quite high. So this copper could be coming from self-supply. So anthropogenic copper could be imported in this area. Cadmium is also measured. Cadmium surface is low and increasing with depth, both Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal. And in addition to that, we have measured neodymium as a water mass tracer in Indian Ocean. So we have measured Bay of Bengal, Arabian Sea, and also Eastern Indian Ocean. You can see here the Bay of Bengal, a lot of neodymium is being supplied with the sediment coming from the Ganga Brahmaputra, whereas in Arabian Sea surface ocean is getting a lot of neodymium from the dust supply. And Eastern Indian Ocean, Indonesian through flow is supplying a lot of radiogenic neodymium. In addition to that, we have also measured RE in these waters. So they all are showing, if you see the past normalized concentration, so all of them are having cerium anomaly with increasing high rare earth elements. Thank you very much at this point. All these measurements have been measured by many of our students. So beneath Satinder Venkatesh, Damu Sneha, Naman, Nirmalya Chaya, and Tapas has contributed significantly to this measurement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sunil, for that, and your colleagues in India for that incredible tour de force of the contribution being made by the Indian community to the collection of data in the Indian Ocean. It's quite remarkable. I think with that, we'll move swiftly to the final speaker. We'll move on to a sort of more synthesis integration perspective and what we can learn about processes in the ocean from bringing the models together, the data together with the modeling efforts. So for that, I'm going to introduce final speaker, Tom Webber from the University of Rochester. Tom describes himself as a biogeochemical modeler. He's interested in trace element cycling, biological carbon pump, and greenhouse gas emissions. He's a member of the US National Scientific Steering Committee for GEOTRACES and a member of the DMC. Thank you, Tom, for joining us. And I think we'll just swiftly move on to your presentation, if that's okay with you.
Sounds good to me. Thanks, Al.
Brilliant. Thanks for preparing that for us.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on your time zone. I'm pleased to talk at this event launching the GeoTraces IDP 2021, which is the culmination of so much hard work by the data collectors and the team involved in compiling and curating the data set. So I want to start by acknowledging all of those colleagues. I'm going to discuss how we can go about extracting global scale process information from the GeoTraces sections using data assimilating models. And the example I'll draw on is quantifying dust deposition from GeoTraces aluminum data, work that was led by my graduate student, Hairong Xu. As you'll be aware, the GeoTraces mission is to understand the exchange of trace elements across ocean boundaries and their internal cycling in the water column using a combination of sections and process studies. Sections map the distribution of trace elements across ocean basins, allowing us to identify regions and elements impacted by each process. Process studies, on the other hand, target specific regions to gather more detailed information about rates and mechanisms. The purpose of my talk is to demonstrate that synthesis and modeling of the section data can also be used to derive detailed process information and scale it up globally. The example I'm going to discuss is dust deposition, a key supply mechanism for micronutrients like iron to the surface ocean. While a number of GeoTraces process studies have provided direct estimates of dust deposition at local scales, For large-scale estimates, we tend to rely on atmospheric models, which simulate the entrainment and transport of dust from desert regions, and ultimately predict its deposition rates on the ocean surface, like this example from the NASA GISS atmospheric chemistry model, which predicts that around 700 teragrams of dust reach the ocean every year, mostly in the Atlantic. Compiling predictions from multiple atmospheric models, 12 here, reveals that there's a lot of uncertainty in the rates and patterns of dust deposition, with some models predicting larger inputs in the Indian and Pacific Oceans relative to the Atlantic. As chemical oceanographers, we know that these different patterns and rates would leave unique signatures in the distributions of elements that dissolve from dust, such as aluminum, meaning that the IDP provides us with a powerful tool to discriminate between these estimates. Use of aluminum as a dust tracer dates back further than the GEOTRACES program to the seminal work by Chris Measures, in which aluminum was assumed to reside in the mixed layer for 5 years before its removal due to scavenging onto biogenic silica particles, allowing the dust supply to be estimated based on the source of soluble aluminum that's required to replace the mixed layer inventory every 5 years. To build on this approach, we need to consider additional processes that might impact mixed layer concentrations, including large-scale transport and vertical mixing of aluminum, which requires in turn more spatially resolved data that's only become available thanks to the GEOTRACES program. The GEOTRACES sections have revealed a dynamic aluminum cycle in subsurface waters that includes desorption of scavenged aluminum, which spreads the signal of dust deposition across depth, aluminum resuspension from seafloor sediments, and hydrothermal inputs at mid-ocean ridges. This leaves us with a whole suite of interconnected processes that need to be jointly constrained if we wish to extract information about dust deposition from the data. Our approach to that problem is to develop a global, three-dimensional model of the ocean aluminum cycle, in which all the different biogeochemical sources and sinks are simulated inside the OCIM data-constrained circulation model. Those biogeochemical processes need to be represented by sets of rules. For example, the aluminum source from dust deposition is represented as the product of a dust deposition rate, the mass fraction of aluminum in dust, and the solubility of aluminum. These rules contain a range of uncertain factors. For instance, we know that there's at least 12 different estimates of dust deposition from atmospheric models that we could select from. And while observations suggest that aluminum solubility scales with atmospheric dust loading, the parameters of that relationship are not well constrained. Our goal then is to allow the GEOTRACES section data to guide us towards the inputs and parameters that allow our model to best explain the observed aluminum distribution. The data we used in this work comprises 11 GEOTRACES sections, 8 of which were available in the previous IDP, shown in black, and 3 in the Pacific, which are newly added to the IDP 2021. Together, these sections cross some of the highest dust deposition regions in the global ocean and the lowest, and contain the signatures of aluminum resuspension from sediments and hydrothermal inputs. For a given pattern of dust deposition, and with some initial guesses for our uncertain parameters, our model will make a prediction about the aluminum distribution along each GEOTRACES transect, which can then be compared to observations. For instance, here's a prediction of the aluminum distribution along the GAO2 section. From this starting point, we then employ genetic algorithm to allow the model to learn from its mistakes and seek parameter sets that allow it to reproduce the observations more accurately, ultimately leading us towards an optimized model whose predictions are a lot more realistic. That optimization process is then repeated for each of the 12 different dust deposition estimates available to us, yielding an ensemble of 12 different optimized aluminum models. Some of those aluminum models are able to reproduce the observed aluminum distribution in all ocean basins quite accurately. This includes, for instance, the model that's supplied with the NASA GISS dust deposition estimate illustrated here, and as the black line in these three profile plots, which fit the red observations quite well. On the other hand, some members of the model ensemble, shown as the family of gray lines, cannot fit the data well, even after parameter optimization, and that yields useful information. It means that the patterns of dust deposition supplied to those models are simply not consistent with the dissolved aluminum distribution, no matter what parameters are selected. In general, the most unskillful models tend to be the ones that contain relatively high dust deposition estimates in the Indian and Pacific Oceans relative to the Atlantic, suggesting that that dust deposition pattern is less realistic. The model data fit for each ensemble member can then be used to identify the most likely estimate for aluminum inputs from dust deposition, which is shown here, and sums globally to 37 gigamoles per year, with the Atlantic contributing around twice as much as any other basin. We can also estimate a likely range for the global flux, which falls between 26 to 48 gigamoles of aluminum per year. An additional insight derived from our model is that in order to best explain the section data, the solubility of aluminum in the model needs to vary spatially by around an order of magnitude, between 10% in regions of lowest atmospheric dust loading, down to 1% in the regions of highest atmospheric dust loading, presumably reflecting different degrees of chemical processing in the atmosphere. Now, that relationship selected by our model agrees reasonably well with observation-based estimates, the colored lines, which are derived by leaching aluminum from aerosols, some of which were collected on the GEOTRACES cruises themselves. I think this is a nice example of section data and process data coming together and telling us a consistent story. For other results of our study, I encourage you take a look at the paper published earlier this year in GBC. In summary, I've shown you briefly that combining aluminum sections with data assimilating models has allowed us to generate a new global estimate of dust deposition constrained by the GeoTraces data product itself, which can then be transferred into other trace element work that requires large-scale dust deposition estimates, like ion cycle modeling. While I don't have time to list all the examples, I want to point out that similar methods to those I presented have been applied to constrain a range of other processes and elemental cycles. However, I feel like we've really only scratched the surface in terms of the information that we can mine from the IDP 2021 using this approach. One particularly exciting avenue is that for any process of interest, the IDP 2021 likely contains multiple useful traces, which can then be combined together into more robust multi-tracer approaches. For instance, aluminum can be combined with thorium isotopes and aerosol data in order to determine dust deposition rates that can jointly satisfy all of those constraints. Finally, if you found this interesting but think the methods I presented are beyond your own expertise, I want to point you towards the awesome OCIM tool developed by Seth John, which uses a simple graphical interface and was specifically designed to put some of these methods in the hands of non-modeling experts. And with that, I want to thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Tom, for that excellent example about how we can bring together all of this GeoTraces data with some modeling tools to learn about those processes, the arrows, right? How big they are, how they might be different in different areas of the ocean. So we're a little bit tight in terms of like time for Q&A. So there's a few comments in the chat. I encourage people to respond to those. I don't see any actual questions necessarily, so I'm going to take my chair's kind of privilege and ask the question to the person whose talk was the shortest. And so I'm going to ask Laramie to talk, give her view on the Arctic, because she looks at presented some great data from the Arctic, but we know the Arctic is a place of really rapid change going on at the moment. And I'm wondering what she feels that GeoTraces could contribute to this real pressing concern about how the Arctic is being modified and what impact that's having on elemental cycling in the ocean.
Yeah, that's a great question. I know we're running out of time, so I'll kind of give you some concise thoughts, I hope. Well, I think that one of the major things that I think about with GeoTraces in the Arctic is that for a lot of the Arctic, that added spatial coverage is just providing a really nice baseline to work from. And I think that the connection, especially between the tracers, at least that I'm looking at, and physical circulation, I think that those tracers could be really good tracers of physical circulation in the Arctic and how that's changing. And I know physical oceanographers are thinking a lot about the freshwater reservoirs, as well as enhanced stratification, and perhaps either a slowing down or modification of some of those intermediate water masses that are formed on the shelves. That's very much dependent on seasonal sea ice cycles. And that could change as a result of a sea ice decline in the Arctic. I think with the International Polar Year cruises too, that provides a nice insight into decadal changes where we have overlapping data, especially in the Eastern Arctic. You know, there are already papers coming out of the 2015 Arctic, kind of comparing data to the IPY cruises and seeing how that's changed at least since 2007 and 2008. So I'm hoping that this is adding some interest to people going out to those sites again to keep collecting trace metal and nutrient data there.
Brilliant, thank you, Laramie. I think that's a really exciting area for further research. So I think to close, I'll answer that question live maybe, citing GeoTraces. There is a digital object identifier associated with the 2021 IDP, and Jameen, that's how you should be citing the data product. If you look at the fair use agreement, there is an explanation of exactly how you should be citing the data product and examples of when you should be reaching out to the individual investigators, for instance, to discuss co-authorship or co-design of studies. So I'm aware that time is ticking on, so I'm going to close up this webinar. I want to thank you all for attending. I want to particularly thank the speakers who took the time to pre-record presentations. I realize that's not the most exciting thing to be doing, but they were really great, I think. I want to thank the panelists for chipping in their time and their opinions on these issues. I want to thank Elena Masferodoras at Lagos for making sure the videos played and all those things behind the scenes. Thank you, Elena, for that. And all the videos will be up online on the GeoTraces website. So if you want to watch them again, you may do so. If you want to relive this wonderful experience together, you can do that from the website as well. And if you really enjoyed the webinar, then there's another one. You can come again at 1 o'clock in the morning UTC, where Bill Landing will fortunately be in my position, and you can hear all of this lovely stuff and have a different conversation with everyone. So I think with that, I'll thank you all for participating. Thank all the scientists for being involved in the GeoTraces, and wish you a good rest of the day wherever you are. Thank you.